Millionaire faked his coma until his nurse's midnight confession changed everything. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. The fluorescent lights in room 312 hummed quietly as machines blinked their steady rhythm, counting every fragile second. Nurses moved in and out like shadows, carrying trays and quiet whispers. But one woman stayed longer than most. Her name was Anna Rivera, a registered nurse who believed in more than just medicine. To her, every heartbeat was a promise, not a number. On the hospital bed lay Grant Carter, once a name that ruled headlines and business pages. A self-made millionaire, known for his ruthless deals and impeccable suits, now reduced to silence, stillness, and tubes. It had been 3 months since the car accident that placed him in a coma. The doctors had done their best, but they whispered what Anna refused to believe: he might never wake up. Every night after her shift ended, Anna would sit beside him for a few extra minutes. She would talk softly, even though she knew he could not answer. Sometimes she told him about the world outside: the rain, the music on the radio, the smell of coffee in the cafeteria. Other times, she read to him from the small book she always carried in her pocket, its pages worn and bent. Healing, she once said softly while adjusting his blanket, is not always about medicine. Sometimes it is about being reminded that someone is still here for you. No one knew why she cared so much for a man like him. Most staff treated him like a story, a rumor, a body in a bed that once owned half the city. But Anna saw something else. Maybe it was the loneliness in his medical chart: no visitors, no family calls, no friends stopping by. Maybe it was the way the world had moved on while he was trapped in stillness. Whatever it was, she refused to give up on him. Sometimes she imagined what kind of man he had been before the crash. The news painted him as cold, ambitious, untouchable. But lying here, pale and quiet, he looked nothing like the powerful man in those glossy photos. He looked human, vulnerable, even gentle. That night, the rain outside beat against the window, echoing like a heartbeat. Anna replaced his IV bag and checked the monitor. The beeping stayed steady. She sighed, her voice low. "You have to come back, Mr. Carter. The world still needs to see who you really are." She did not know that behind those closed eyelids, something stirred. Deep inside the fog of his coma, a flicker of awareness moved. He heard her voice, not as words, but as warmth. It was faint, like light breaking through water, but it was enough to make his fingers twitch ever so slightly. Anna froze. Did she imagine it? She leaned closer, watching his hand carefully. Nothing, just stillness again. She exhaled, half laughing at her own hope. "You scared me," she whispered. "If you are planning to wake up, at least give me a warning next time." She turned off the bedside lamp, leaving only the monitor's soft glow. But as she walked toward the door, Grant's eyelids fluttered once brief, almost invisible, and his lips moved just slightly, as if forming a word that never made it out. Outside, the hallway was empty, except for the echo of her footsteps fading into the night. Inside, room 312, the millionaire who had once controlled everything now lay between two worlds, one of silence and one of the woman who refused to give up on him. And somewhere in that fragile space between dreaming and waking, a thought began to form inside him, a whisper that even he could not hear yet. Maybe this time it is not about money. Maybe it is about finding something real. The next morning came quietly, the sky still gray from the night rain. Anna walked into room 312 with her usual calm, carrying a fresh set of linens and a clipboard tucked under her arm. She greeted her patient softly, as she always did. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she said, adjusting the blinds so that a little sunlight could warm the room. "It is another new day, and you are still here. That is progress." The machines hummed the same rhythm as yesterday, but something in the air felt different. Anna checked the monitor readings, steady, strong, better than before. She smiled faintly. "I guess you are proving me right," she whispered. "You really are a fighter." As she began changing the sheets, her mind wandered. There was something strange about caring for a man who had everything yet lay so helpless. His file said he owned multiple companies, but there was no emergency contact listed. Not a single friend or family member had called in months. It was as if the world had left him behind the moment he fell. Anna frowned at that thought. She had seen so many patients forgotten when they stopped being useful. But something about him, the quiet weight in the room, the dignity that still clung to him even now made her want to believe he could come back, not just to life, but to meaning. At noon, she sat by his bedside during her short break, eating her sandwich in silence. The rhythmic beeping of the monitor became the only sound. She found herself talking again, like she did every day. You know, I used to think people like you never needed anyone. But I guess everyone ends up needing somebody at some point, even billionaires. She chuckled softly at her own words. Maybe you should wake up soon. The hospital food is terrible, and someone has to tell me if I am doing your hair right. Her voice filled the room with warmth, the kind that could not be found in textbooks or machines. What she did not see was the subtle flicker of movement beneath his eyelids. Somewhere deep within the stillness of his mind, Grant Carter was listening. He could not move, could not speak, but her words cut through the fog that surrounded him. They were like small sparks, reminding him of something he had forgotten long ago, what it felt like to be seen without expectation. The sound of her laughter echoed in his memory, and for the first time, a thought broke through the noise. Why does she stay? Days turned into a quiet rhythm. Anna spoke, and Grant listened from the darkness. She told him stories about her life before nursing, how she grew up in a small town, how she had lost her mother, how she still sent money home to help her younger brother through college. She did not know why she shared so much. Maybe because he was the only one who could not interrupt or judge. Maybe because she felt safe with someone who could not answer back. One night, near the end of her shift, she sat beside him again, her voice soft but weary. You know, sometimes I wonder if anyone ever really knew you, she said, because if they did, they would not have left you alone like this. She reached for his hand, hesitant, then held it gently. I do not even know why I am talking like this. Maybe I just needed someone to listen to. The monitor's beeping slowed for a moment, steady but heavy, as if his heart responded. Anna smiled tiredly. I hope you are dreaming of something peaceful. Not boardrooms or deadlines, something real, like the ocean. Or maybe just silence. When her shift ended, she turned off the overhead light, leaving only the soft blue glow from the machines. As she closed the door behind her, the faintest whisper escaped from the bed. A breath, a twitch, almost a word. Inside his mind, Grant felt something stir again. He remembered voices, faces, empty champagne glasses, hollow victories. None of them meant anything now. But her voice, it felt different. It was not noise. It was an anchor. In the quiet dark of room 312, his mind began to piece itself together. And deep down, under the weight of silence, a single realization surfaced. He was tired of pretending, even here. Tired of the act that had built his empire and buried his soul. For the first time, Grant Carter wanted to wake up not as the man everyone feared, but as someone who could finally be seen. And in the hallway, Anna Rivera walked away, unaware that her kindness had already begun to pull a lost man back from the edge of nothing. It was just after midnight when the hospital fell silent. The lights in the hallway dimmed to a soft blue, and the only sound left in room 312 was the steady hum of the machines. Anna stayed a few minutes longer than her shift required. Something about that night felt different, though she could not say why. She adjusted the blanket over Grant's chest, checked his pulse, and whispered the words she always did. You are not alone, Mr. Carter. I will see you in the morning. As she turned to leave, a quiet gasp escaped behind her. She froze. The sound was faint but real, a deep, ragged breath breaking through months of stillness. She spun back toward the bed, eyes wide. Mr. Carter? She whispered. His fingers twitched. His chest rose again, stronger this time. The heart monitor beeped faster, its rhythm shifting from steady to alive. Anna pressed the call button, but she did not move away from him. She leaned close, her heart pounding. Grant, can you hear me? It is Anna. You are safe. You are in the hospital. Si selam mein berapses rise, sever paces tu dap say. His eyelids fluttered, struggling against the weight of time. Then, slowly, they opened. The room's dim light reflected in his eyes, confused, distant, and full of fear. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked, no sound coming out. Anna steadied herself, holding his hand gently. Do not try to talk yet. she said softly. You have been asleep for a long time. Tears welled in her eyes as she watched the impossible unfold. Nurses rushed in, doctors followed, the room filled with urgent voices. But through all the noise, his gaze never left hers. His lips moved again, barely audible. You stayed. Anna nodded, unable to speak. Yes, you came back. The medical team worked around her, checking his vitals, adjusting the machines, speaking in clipped professional tones. Anna stepped back, giving them space, but her hands trembled. She had seen patients recover before, but never like this. This felt different, like the world itself had shifted inside that small room. Hours later, when the chaos calmed and the doctors left, Anna remained by his bedside. Grant lay awake now, eyes half open, breathing steady. His voice was still rough, barely a whisper. How long? 3 months, she said. You have been in a coma since the accident. He stared at the ceiling, trying to piece together memories that refused to come. Why are you here? He asked weakly. Anna smiled faintly. Because someone had to be. He looked at her again, the corners of his mouth twitching as if remembering how to smile. You talked to me, he murmured. I heard you. Her breath caught. You did? He nodded slowly. Every word. Anna sat back down, her hands tightening around the edge of her chair. The weight of his words filled the space between them. Every conversation, every confession she had whispered in the dark, all of it heard by the man who now stared at her with quiet awe. You saved me, he said softly. She shook her head. No, you saved yourself. I just did not give up on you. The room fell quiet again, but it was no longer empty. For the first time since his accident, there was warmth in the air, two lives that had collided by chance, now bound by the unspoken truth between them. As dawn began to rise outside, painting the sky in soft gold, Anna looked at him one last time before ending her shift. Rest now, Mr. Carter, she said. You have a second chance. Do not waste it. He watched her leave, her voice echoing in his mind long after the door closed. And as the first sunlight touched his face, Grant Carter, once a man who had everything but compassion, felt something new. Gratitude. Days passed, and the quiet rhythm of the hospital began to change. Room 312 was no longer just a place of silence and machines. It was now a room where voices filled the air. Grant Carter was awake, and every day brought a little more strength to his body and a little more light to his eyes. Anna came by each morning with her clipboard and that same calm smile. She checked his vitals, changed his IV line, and asked how he was feeling. At first, he answered with single words, his voice rough from disuse. But with time, he began to speak in full sentences. Each conversation felt like a small victory. I used to hate hospitals, he said one afternoon as sunlight streamed across the floor. Now it feels strange to think this is where I opened my eyes again. It is there. Anna smiled, adjusting the blanket over his legs. That is because you are not a patient anymore. You are a survivor. He looked at her for a moment, thoughtful. I do not remember everything, he said quietly, but I remember your voice. I thought it was a dream. Her cheeks warmed slightly. It was not a dream. I was just talking to keep you company. Grant studied her face for a long second before nodding. Then I think your voice kept me alive. Anna looked away, pretending to check the monitor, but her heart raced. She had heard gratitude before from patients, but never like this. There was something sincere, something deeper in his tone. In the following days, Grant's progress amazed everyone. He began walking short distances with the help of a cane. The staff often stopped to watch the once powerful millionaire take his careful, unsteady steps down the hallway. But he did not seem embarrassed. He laughed when he stumbled, thanked every nurse who passed, and spoke kindly to everyone who entered his room. To Anna, he no longer looked like the man from the newspaper articles, the one surrounded by luxury and ego. He looked human, even humble. One morning, as she brought in his breakfast tray, she found him sitting by the window, sketching something in a notebook. You draw? She asked with a hint of surprise. He smiled without looking up. Not really. I just needed to remind myself what light looks like. She stood there for a moment, watching him outline the skyline outside. It struck her how different he seemed now. The man who once owned half the city was now trying to capture it with a pencil. Before she left the room, he called out softly, Anna. She turned. I do not know what kind of man I was before, he said, meeting her eyes. but I want to be the kind of man who deserves the kindness you gave me." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The monitor beside him beeped steadily, the sunlight touched his face, and something unspoken hung between them, an understanding that healing was more than physical. Anna nodded slowly. "Then start by forgiving yourself. The rest will follow." Grant smiled faintly. "Maybe I will start with that." And as she left the room, the nurse who had once spoken to a silent man now carried the quiet certainty that he had truly begun to live again. A month later, Grant Carter's discharge papers were finally ready. The day he left the hospital, the air smelled of rain and renewal. The nurses gathered around the doorway to wish him well, their smiles warm but bittersweet. Yet Grant's eyes searched for only one face. Anna stood by the exit, her uniform crisp, her expression steady but soft. She held a small folder in her hands and greeted him with the same calm tone she had used from the first day. "Your paperwork is complete, Mr. Carter," she said. "You are officially free to go." Grant chuckled, leaning lightly on his cane. "Free," he repeated. "That feels strange to hear." "Try not to get into any more accidents," she said, her voice carrying a hint of humor that quickly faded. "I will do my best," he replied. "But tell me, will you visit me sometime? Maybe to check if I am following doctor's orders?" Anna smiled faintly and shook her head. "I think you will be fine. You have come too far to go back now." For a brief second, he looked as if he wanted to say something more, but she stepped back, keeping her composure. "Take care of yourself," she said softly. "And thank you for proving me right." Grant's lips curved into a small smile. "No, Anna. Thank you for believing when no one else did." A black car waited at the curb outside the hospital. As he walked toward it, the sound of his cane echoed against the tile floor. He paused once before stepping out, turning back to see her still standing in the doorway. He raised his hand in quiet gratitude, and she nodded in return. When the car pulled away, the city stretched before him like a place he had never seen. For the first time in years, the glass towers and endless traffic did not look like empires, they looked alive. That night, alone in his penthouse, Grant wandered through rooms that felt too large, too silent. Flowers from business partners lined the tables, cards from acquaintances stacked by the door. Yet none of them mattered. The only voice he wanted to hear was the one that had reached him in the dark. He sat by the window, the skyline glowing in the distance, and reached into his coat pocket. There, tucked between the pages of his discharge papers, was a small folded note in familiar handwriting. It read, "Healing takes time, but do not forget being alive is not the same as living." Grant read the words twice, then set the note beside the piano in his living room. He sat down, his fingers trembling as they touched the keys. The melody that filled the room was uneven, but full of life. The same song Anna had played quietly through her phone in room 312. Across the city, at the hospital, Anna paused during her night shift. Somewhere deep inside, she could almost hear the faint echo of a piano through the rain, soft and healing, as if the music she once shared had found its way back to her. And for the first time in months, both of them smiled at the same quiet hour, two souls still connected by the sound of hope. Weeks passed, and the city outside Grant Carter's penthouse slowly began to move at its usual relentless pace. But for him, everything felt different now. The man who once woke up thinking only of meetings and money now started each morning sitting at his piano, his fingers tracing melodies that reminded him he was still human. His assistant, Daniel, noticed the change immediately. The sharp, demanding tone that once defined Grant's voice had been replaced by calm. He had canceled business meetings, postponed negotiations, and ignored most of the company's demands. Instead, he spent his days in physical therapy and quiet reflection. "You are not the same man who used to walk through those doors," Daniel said one morning, half teasing, half amazed. Grant smiled faintly. "Maybe that is a good thing." One afternoon, while sorting through old files, he came across a folder from the week of his accident. Inside were documents, reports, and an unsigned contract that made his heart sink. The deal that had brought him his final meeting before the crash had not been an accident at all. It was a setup engineered by a business partner who had tried to force him out. For a long moment, Grant sat in silence, the papers trembling in his hands. The realization hit harder than any boardroom betrayal ever had. He had almost died for something meaningless, and the people he had once called partners had not even visited him once in the hospital. That night, he stood on his balcony, looking down at the city lights. The rain had begun again, just like the night Anna used to talk to him when he was trapped between worlds. He remembered her words clearly now. Healing is not just surviving. He made a decision. The next morning, Grant arrived at his company headquarters for the first time in months. The staff froze at the sight of him walking through the glass doors, cane in hand, eyes steady but calm. He called an emergency meeting. When everyone gathered, he spoke quietly but firmly. "Some of you might have assumed I would not return," he began. "But I did, and I am not here to rebuild what we lost. I am here to rebuild who we are." His employees exchanged uncertain glances, but they listened. Grant revealed the truth about the betrayal, not with anger, but with clarity. He announced sweeping reforms, new leadership, fairer practices, a foundation to support medical care for underfunded hospitals. The room was silent when he finished. Some looked guilty, others inspired. Grant knew change would not come easily, but he no longer needed control. He needed meaning. As the meeting ended, he slipped his phone from his pocket and opened a new message. He typed, paused, then deleted the words twice before settling on one simple line. "Thank you for helping me remember who I am." He sent it to Anna. Across town, Anna was finishing her shift when her phone buzzed. She read the message once, then again, her lips curving into a soft smile. No reply was needed. The music between them had already spoken more than words ever could. Outside, the city glowed through the rain, and for both of them, the world finally felt alive again. A few weeks later, the hospital that had once been just another building in the city became the focus of something new. Grant Carter had returned not as a patient this time, but as a donor. He arrived quietly, wearing a simple gray suit, without cameras or press. Most of the staff did not even recognize him at first. Anna was organizing patient charts at the nurse's station when she looked up and froze. He stood a few feet away, taller and stronger now, his cane barely touching the floor. "Mr. Carter," she said, startled. "You should not be here without an appointment." He smiled, his eyes soft. "It is not a medical visit. I am here to deliver something." From his briefcase, he handed her a sealed envelope. She hesitated before opening it. Inside was a letter and a foundation document bearing his signature. The words made her blink twice to be sure she read them correctly. It was an official pledge, a fund to support long-term care patients who could not afford treatment. The name of the foundation read, "The Rivera Fund for Compassionate Care." Anna's voice trembled. "You named it after me?" Grant nodded. "Because you taught me what care really means. Money never healed anyone. People do." For a moment, neither spoke. The noise of the hospital faded into the background. Anna's eyes glistened, and she struggled to find words. "I do not know what to say." "Then do not," he said gently. "Just keep doing what you already do. That is enough." The intercom called her name for the next patient, and she turned reluctantly, professionalism taking over again. Before she walked away, she looked back at him. "You really changed, Grant." He smiled faintly. "I just stopped pretending." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "Then I am glad you woke up." "So am I," he said. As she disappeared into the hallway, Grant watched her go with quiet gratitude. Around him, the sound of life filled the air, voices, laughter, footsteps, the steady pulse of healing that no machine could measure. And for the first time, Grant Carter understood that redemption was not a destination. It was a decision made every single day. Spring came early that year, and with it, the grand opening of the Rivera Fund for Compassionate Care. The hospital courtyard, usually quiet, was filled with flowers, camera flashes, and people in crisp white coats. Reporters covered the event, but for Grant Carter, the day was not about publicity. It was about gratitude. He stood at the podium, still leaning lightly on his cane, his voice steady and calm. "Months ago," he began, "I came here as a man who thought he understood success. I had wealth, power, and recognition. But when I lay in that hospital bed, none of it mattered. What brought me back was not medicine alone, it was kindness. It was the sound of someone believing in me when I could not believe in myself." His gaze found Anna in the crowd. She stood near the back, hands clasped in front of her, eyes glistening. He smiled softly. "This foundation is not a gift from me," he continued. "It is a reminder that compassion has value far beyond any fortune. It is named for the person who reminded me of that truth." The audience applauded, But for a moment, all sound faded, except for the wind carrying the faint scent of spring. After the ceremony ended, Grant walked toward Anna through the crowd. "You did not tell me you were giving a speech," she said, smiling. "I did not plan to," he replied. "But some things need to be said out loud." She looked at him with quiet pride. "You really built something meaningful." He shook his head. "You did. I just gave it a name." They stood in silence for a moment as the reporters moved on. The sunlight touched her hair, and he caught himself remembering that first night in room 312, the soft hum of the monitor, her voice filling the darkness. "You know," he said gently, "I never thanked you properly." Anna tilted her head, amused. "You named a foundation after me. I think that counts." "Maybe," he said with a small grin. "But I owe you more than a name. You gave me a second life." Her smile was calm, knowing. "And you used it well, Mr. Carter." The moment lingered between them, tender and unspoken. In her eyes, he no longer saw a nurse and a patient. He saw two survivors of the same miracle, the quiet power of kindness that changed everything. That evening, when the celebration ended and the last of the guests had left, Grant Carter found himself alone in the quiet courtyard of the hospital. The night air was cool, the scent of rain clinging to the flowers that surrounded the stage. Strings of soft lights swayed gently above him, and for the first time in a long while, he felt peace. He walked toward the old wing of the hospital, the same one that held room 312. The door was open, the hallway still familiar. He paused at the window near the end of the corridor where the light used to spill across the floor every morning. It felt strange and yet comforting to be back where everything had changed. Anna appeared a moment later, her steps light and unhurried. "I thought you might come here," she said softly. Grant smiled. "I guess part of me needed to say goodbye." She nodded. "To the old version of yourself?" "Exactly," he said. "The one who thought winning meant never losing anything. He was wrong." They stood side by side, the faint glow from the hallway painting soft gold across their faces. Anna folded her arms, gazing out the window. "Do you ever think about it the nights you were here?" "Every day," he said. "I remember your voice before anything else. It was the only thing real in a world I did not recognize." Her lips curved gently. "I was just doing my job." He shook his head. "No, you were doing more. You reminded me how to live. You showed me what worth really means." For a long moment, silence filled the corridor, heavy with gratitude and something deeper that neither dared name. Then Anna turned toward him. "You should go home, Grant. You have a life waiting for you now." He smiled faintly. "Maybe, but this place will always be where I started again." Is thinning and Dodd on 40 self. From his coat pocket, he took out a small silver keychain, a simple heart-shaped charm engraved with a single line. "To those who heal without asking for anything in return." He placed it on the counter beside the nurse's station. "For you," he said. "For all of you." Anna stared at it, her throat tightening. "You really did not have to." "I did," he said, "because some debts can only be paid forward." As he walked toward the exit, she called out softly, "Grant." He stopped, looking back. "You said once that you wanted to be the kind of man who deserved kindness. I think you already are." He held her gaze for a long second before nodding. "Thank you, Anna, for everything." He stepped out into the night. The city lights shimmered in the puddles on the pavement, reflecting the glow of the hospital behind him. He breathed in deeply, feeling the cool air fill his lungs, an ordinary act that now felt like a miracle. In her station, Anna picked up the silver charm and smiled through tears. The monitor from a nearby room beeped steadily, the same sound that had once kept her company through long nights. For a moment, she closed her eyes, listening, remembering the man who had once been a story and had become something far greater. Outside, Grant reached his car and paused one last time. Through the glass doors, he could still see her silhouette framed by the hallway light. He raised a hand in silent gratitude, then turned toward the open road ahead. The night sky stretched endlessly above him, clear and full of stars. Somewhere in the distance, a faint melody drifted from a piano, soft, steady, alive. And in that quiet music, two hearts remained connected not by fate, not by debt, but by the truth they had discovered together. Healing is not about being saved, it is about learning how to live again.